industrial action and strikes are gripping the country. The reason why is inflation, with workers rejecting pay rises below inflation, which actually leave them poorer. The political ground zero for this is the NHS, with nurses, ambulance workers and support staff all going on strike over the Christmas period. But one response from the government has been to say that workers aren't rejecting a pay offer from them, but from an independent pay review body. Here's Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, a few days ago on Sky News.
Since 2010, MP salaries have risen by 28%. You know, and you will accept, that nurses' pay has reduced in real terms by between 10 and 20%. Is that fair?
Well, look, we have accepted we have an independent pay review body for people who work in
Well, you ignored the pay review body when you instituted the pay freeze. You don't have to do what the pay review says.
Well, no, but the pay review body's made recommendations about rises,
which you've ignored in the past.
Which we have accepted in full, which means the nurse will get a £1,400 pay rise, which is targeted also at the lowest paid, which gives them a larger pay rise than other people. But you've got to balance that against whether it's widely affordable. The most important thing is that we get inflation under control. That's what's at the root of a lot of these issues. And that's why we've got to balance rewarding hard-working public servants, but also not having inflation-busting pay rises that will embed inflation.
Is it fair that MPs' wages have risen faster than starting salaries for police, teachers and nurses since the Conservatives have been in power?
We don't set MPs' pay, as you know.
That's an independent pay body, and they seem to have got that wrong.
As you know, MPs' pay is set by an independent body. We have nothing to do with setting it at all. You'll remember that change was made back in 2010. So MPs have nothing to do with setting their pay. It's an independent body.
It's not fair.
And they make
that
the recommendations.
Pay body, that independent pay body got it wrong. All I'm gently suggesting is that when it comes to nurses' pay, perhaps they've got this wrong.
Well, look, they take evidence both from the government but also from the trade unions. They look at recruitment and retention. They look at all of those things and they make recommendations, and we've accepted them. And I think most people will think that what's been offered is reasonable. It's in line with what people are getting in the private sector. I think most people listening to this will think they've had a reasonable pay offer, and I hope they accept it.
What a great line. It's not us, it's an independent pay review body. That was what we heard from the Prime Minister, the Health Secretary, and just about every Tory MP doing media rounds this week. But Pat Cullen, the General Secretary of the Royal College of Nurses, had this to say in response on BBC Breakfast.
What is the point of the independent pay review body? An independent pay review body set up by government, paid by government, appointed by government, and the parameters of their review set by government. So there's nothing independent about it, and that's why they come up with the 3% that they've come up with. And in fact, if you look back, the budget was already set for 3% in the trusts like I'm standing in front of today. So there's nothing independent about the independent pay review body. It might be accepted by government, it's not accepted by the Royal College of Nursing, and it's certainly not accepted by the 320,000 members that voted in this ballot.
Cullen has said words to similar effect whenever she's done media rounds, be it on BBC Radio 4 or Question Time. She basically has no confidence in the process we have for pay rises in the public sector. So what's the truth regarding the NHS pay review body? Well, to start, there are 9 such bodies in the UK. They cover 2.5 million public sector workers and negotiate £100 billion worth of pay a year. They were created after a series of conflicts between the government and NHS doctors in 1963. But the process gradually extended to cover 45% of all public sector workers, hence why our Transport Secretary has an opinion on nurses' pay. Now, these independent pay review bodies have traditionally been supported by all sides. They've been seen as genuinely independent and the best way to ensure that wages for those in the public sector keep pace with the private sector. So Pat Cullen and the RCN's position on this is new, and the fact that nurses want a 19% pay rise while an independent body is offering 4% shows the extent of the problem. Cullen recently told the Financial Times that the RCN had been hoodwinked into lending credence to this process for years, with the government using the pay review body for cover. That is why the RCN, the Royal College of Nurses, is considering whether it will take part in these independent processes in future. But the Royal College of Nurses is far from alone on that. The GMB union, which represents ambulance workers, has said it is withdrawing from the process next year. Unite the Union told the Financial Times existing pay bodies are, quote, not fit for purpose, while Kevin Courtney, the Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union, the NEU, has said education unions are considering a boycott of the process next year. Now, here's a graph courtesy of the Financial Times. As you can see, it shows proposed pay rises for nurses and headline inflation since 1984. What is understandable and undeniable from my point of view, I think it's indisputable, you really can't go against this, is that since 2010, nurses have had a very poor deal. You can see there, just after 2010, several years of pay freezes. And I think for 7 of the last 10 years, inflation, the headline rate of inflation, has been above the recommended headline pay rise. And it's particularly bad this year. You can see it's massively outstripped by inflation. And that's a change with before, and explains why the Royal College of Nurses has had enough. For a growing army of skeptics, the independence of those who sit on paid bodies is compromised. That's because their remit is set by the government, and they themselves are chosen by the government. The chair of each committee, and there are 9 altogether, as I've just said, is appointed by, guess who? The Prime Minister, while the other members are appointed by the Prime Minister or the relevant Secretary of State. What's more, the process requires them to include affordability constraints, departmental spending plans, and the government's 2% inflation target. So it's easy to see how a government which favours austerity can build in low pay for public sector workers. Seems like it's rigged. Nihal, what's your view? Are independent pay review bodies committed to semi-permanent austerity with professions like nursing?
It's really evident here. There's just a way in which the government can reject its responsibility and delay taking key decisions. It's just more mental gymnastics to undermine workers' demands. The government first tried using the 19% request to, make it seem as if it's an outrageous demand. But they don't even want to give a counter offer. And it also doesn't make sense to keep saying it's a pay rise when it's just the staff trying to avoid a real terms pay cut and loss in compensation. And like you said, Aaron, the review board is constrained in its remit by the Tory government, handpicked by the Tory government, and given pay parameters by the Tory government. It's the oldest trick in the book under neoliberalism, to contract your dirty work out so that you technically don't have to be culpable for anything. And the second point is, if they were truly independent, then recommending anything other than a real terms pay rise must be a given, surely. It is failing in its mandate to do so, then, if it's an independent body, if NHS staff are skipping meals and relying on food banks.